In the near future, overpopulation is a major problem for all nations. To tackle this issue, the UN has mandated a 5% annual population reduction. In response, the US government has implemented a standardized test called the 10-241, or the thinning for individuals aged 8 to 24. Every year, millions of teenagers with the lowest IQ scores face this consequence. This mass execution clearly violates human rights. Yet there is no opposition. Even the UN supports it. Why is no one saying anything? Let's uncover the full story of this movie in this video. In Austin, Texas, students are preparing for the thinning, which is set to take place in 18 hours. Simon and his older sister, Laina, are sitting at a desk in his room as Laina tries to mentor him. Their younger siblings, Corinne and Joey, are sitting on the bed playing games. Even with Laina's help, Simon gets frustrated and says he can't learn enough before the test. He asks Laina for something and gives her money in exchange for a contact lens that he can use to cheat. When he tries it on, it displays the answers to the math problems in his notebook. She reminds him that he has to destroy it after the test. Laina then receives a call from Dr. Perkash, who tells her that her mom has been trying to get discharged from the hospital against medical advice. She asks the doctor to stall her mom and tells her siblings that they have to go. At the hospital, Laina intercepts her mom signing herself out. The doctor pulls Laina aside and reveals that her mom is only getting worse, even though they can't treat her if she goes home. He explains that making her comfortable might be the most they can do for her. At the governor's mansion, just 12 hours until the thinning, Blake passes a few bodyguards in the hallway. He offers to get them something from the kitchen, but they decline. Instead, Blake sneaks out of the house to his car, where he finds his girlfriend, Ellie. She startles him and jokes that the same trick always works on him. When Blake insists that this time would be the last, they soberly remember the test they have the next day. Ellie refuses to talk about it and instead decides to show him something that she insists is a secret. She leads him to the Bilskis' mansion, where they strip and swim in the pool. Afterward, they kiss in the car until Ellie admits that she's scared about the test. Then Vince, one of the bodyguards, catches them and brings Blake back to his dad. Blake's dad, Governor Redding, lectures his son and tells him that while it's okay to have fun, he has to pick better moments. He insists that Ellie is a distraction that Blake can't afford until he gets through tomorrow's test and his final test next year. After that, Blake can be distracted for the rest of his life. Governor Redding gives Blake a hug before he leaves the room. 3 hours before the thinning, guards patrol a militaristic school surrounded by chain-link fences, barbed wire, and cameras. Students approach the facility, watched by guards in black masks. Simon bumped into another student, dropped his contact lens, and was unable to find it. The guard ordered him to keep moving. Blake approached Laina as she watched students saying goodbye to their parents. He asked for a study guide, but she explained that she had given the last one away. Kellan, her friend, asked about Blake, but she insisted that she barely knew him. The guards check students for cheating devices. When one guilty student is discovered, they chase him down and catch him with a net. Kellan uses his dad's security access to view the security footage and sends it to a reporter he claims to know, named Wendy Banks. He explains that he has her email, though she doesn't seem to respond to his tips. Inside the school, Blake tries to comfort Ellie. 15 minutes before the test begins, the guards lock down the school. The students gather in their classrooms, and teachers review the rules. Miss Birch tells her students that she's proud of them, and that the questions are tough but not meant to trick them. She also insists that there's always a chance. A second teacher, Mr. Glass, also goes over the rules and reminds the students that the test is an accurate aptitude assessment. He then orders them to begin, and the lights in the classroom dim. Each student picks up a tablet and begins to take the test, with the tablets lighting up their faces. The teachers warn the students when they have 1 minute remaining, then announce the end of the test. As the students wait for their results, some show signs of stress. They squirm in their seats, cry, or look uncomfortable. Kellan is among them. Eventually, the names of the students who failed are read out. With each name called, a student is removed. Some cooperate, some beg, and others require force. Kellan is relieved that he passed, but Ellie fails. The remaining students are congratulated for passing and released to the rec room. Laina sees Simon being led away by the failed students, and Blake calls his dad to beg for him to do something to save Ellie. However, his dad insists that he has to obey the law. Blake becomes angry and slams the locker. He then runs after them and attacks a guard with a fire extinguisher. He instructs Ellie to run while the guards are distracted, but she is stopped by the crowd and gets caught. 1 year later. The next test is 24 hours away. Laina sits at a table with her 2 younger siblings, surrounded by boxes. One of them holds a pamphlet that indicates their mother has passed away. Miss Birch visits to bring the family extra casserole and tries to comfort Laina about the fact that Corinne will be taking her first test. Meanwhile, Blake works out in his room. He still has a picture of Ellie pinned to his wall. He begins to record a video on a tablet, saying that if someone was watching it, he would already be dead. 3 hours before the test, Laina quizzes Corinne as they approach the school. She hugs her before sending her inside. Governor Redding discusses plans for an announcement with Vince, checking that everything is ready. Then, he checks in with Blake. He tries to convince Blake that nothing can be done about Ellie, but Blake dismisses him. Blake leaves for school and Vince sees him put a package in a mailbox along the way. Laina and Kellan meet up at the school and talk about the fact that this is their last test. Kellan admits that he is nervous but recognizes that Laina probably isn't because of how smart she is. Instead, she's more nervous about Corinne than herself. As they make their way inside, Kellan encounters Wade, a quarterback who ends up bullying another student. They question whether he is intelligent enough to have survived for this long. Just 15 minutes before the test, the school is once again put on lockdown. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Vince talks to Governor Redding about his son and presents him with the package that Blake had attempted to deliver. Inside is Blake's tablet, where he recorded a video explaining his plan to intentionally fail the test. In the video, he explains that if his dad wants to stand by this system, he'd have to stand by the system that killed his son. The governor demands that his son be brought home, but the school is locked down and he throws a chair in frustration. Then he tells the other bodyguard to leave the room. At the facility, Blake is waiting to take his test while a dark-haired girl named Sarah looks at Mr. Glass. She had slept with him in an attempt to get a passing score, but he didn't meet her gaze. In a classroom of younger kids, Miss Cole shows her students a video before their first test. The video is created by a company called Asuru Global and features a cartoon Earth explaining the reason for the test implementation as a way to deal with overpopulation. It describes how some other countries have either killed their elderly or restricted the number of children a couple could have. In contrast, America only allows intelligent kids to live there, thus enabling it to become the best country again. The video depicts the kids who fail the test as simply helping the planet to feel better. Miss Cole steps outside to take a minute for herself. A guard offers to have someone else give the test if she's not up for it, but she declines the offer. She returns to the classroom as the kids finish the video and clap. She directs them to take the exciting test they had been practicing for. The older students also start the test. From the control room, Mason King watches over them and receives a call, which he answers. Blake finishes his test early in the classroom and Mr. Glass notices. Amongst the smaller kids, Nathan raises his hand for help on a question, but Miss Cole isn't allowed to help him, so she tells him to do his best. Once the test is finished, Miss Cole tells the students to stand up and follow the leader if their name is called. The teachers read out the names of the failed students. Among them are Nathan, Sarah, and Laina, but not Blake. Mason calls the mayor to confirm that the transfer was successful and that Blake is safe. The mayor then approves the commencement of the thinning. Blake watches as the failed kids are sent down the hall. Miss Birch runs to intercept a guard and insists that Laina is the best student she's had and that she can't believe that Laina could have failed. The guard checks with his superiors, but they insist that there's no problem and he's told to send Laina off. The teacher holds on to Laina for a moment and slips her a keycard, reminding her that there's always a chance and telling her to get away. In the rec room, students are congratulated for making it. They eat and dance to music. Miss Birch spots Mr. Glass flirting with another dark-haired student. Elsewhere, Governor Redding takes steps on stage for a big announcement. He starts by talking about all the ways he's improved things during his time as governor. He talks about the difficult but necessary decisions that had to be made. At the school, his speech plays on a TV at the party. Blake sees it and leaves. As the governor continues to discuss how the thinning is not a barbaric practice, but is instead leading in innovation and an effort to make the population the best it can be, the failed kids are being led down a hallway. They were instructed to take off their clothes and prepare for decontamination. Laina slipped the keycard into her mouth to hide it. As Blake began to make his way through the school hallways, his dad announced his candidacy for president. The failed kids were given new clothes and then led to a room with a few rows of chairs. They are each cuffed to a chair and the surrounding guards draw syringes. Some of the kids begin to panic. In the hallway, Blake acts hurt to lure a guard towards him, then knocks him out. After that, he makes his way to the control room and sneaks inside after Mason leaves it. He tries to use the computer, but it requires a login. Instead, he shuts off the power to the school just as Mason discovers the unconscious guard. Some of the kids who failed their tests are released from their restraints, causing chaos as the guards try to regain control. Laina manages to escape during the commotion by using Miss Birch's keycard to open the door. Mason requests that Kellan's dad, Victor Wood, be sent to the control room to fix the system failure. The guards interrupt the party to fetch Victor, telling the guests it's just a minor power outage. Mason then goes to check on the failed kids, who are back under the guards' control. He asks if they had done a head count and discovers that they hadn't. They realize that Laina is missing. A guard notices Laina trying to get out a door, but she introduces herself as Miss Birch and tells him that she had called him when she had seen a student run down the stairwell. Once he turns his back to her, she attacks. Blake shows up, and the two of them take the guard down. Laina and Blake are talking, and Laina insists that she couldn't have failed the test. Blake admits that he failed on purpose, but his dad got him out. Laina realizes that something is off, and when Blake sets off an alarm, they climb into a vent to escape. Mason decides that the school will stay in lockdown until the situation is resolved, even though they have passed the time when parents were expecting to see their children. He hears about another guard who had been attacked by someone claiming to be a teacher. He then calls for all the teachers to be brought to a holding room. Laina and Blake discuss Laina selling cheats to desperate kids for the test. Blake judges her for taking advantage of them until she reveals that it was a desperate attempt to pay for her mom's treatments, which still wasn't enough. Blake apologizes for judging her. They begin making their way to the server room through the vents. Governor Redding's interview is interrupted by news of the prolonged shutdown at the school, and the news anchor asks him about it. The governor stumbles as he lacks information, but insists that the situation will be resolved soon. Mason addresses the teachers and instructs them to present their IDs and keycards. The governor calls him to get details about the situation and angrily tells them to figure it out quickly. Blake and Laina continue through the vents until Blake falls through one and into a pool below. Laina jumps in after him to save him and gets him to the edge of the pool, where she resuscitates him with CPR. They retrieve dry clothes from the lockers and change, turning their backs to each other for privacy. Laina finds another vent and they climb back in. In the rec room, the students who passed begin to get impatient with the guards, and one of the guards beats up a student. Kellan records it on his phone and sends it to Wendy. Laina and Blake made it to the outside of the server room, but the keycard fell out of Laina's pocket and landed below the vent. They went to a science classroom where Laina used a magnet to fish for the key. However, they made too much noise, and as a guard approached, Laina managed to get back into the vent while Blake stayed in the room. Blake tried to hide, but the guard caught him. When Laina tries fishing for the key, a guard notices and grabs it. However, the guard turns out to be Blake in a guard's uniform. He tells her that he'll head towards the thinning. In the holding room, Miss Birch suggests to Mr. Glass that they get a drink together. As they flirt, she steals his keycard. Miss Birch then shows Mason her ID and Mr. Glass's keycard to take suspicion off of herself. When Mr. Glass is not around, Mason suspects that he is the traitor. Laina arrives in the server room and finds a computer. She tries to use her keycard, but it requires Mason's password. She messages Kellan for help, only to find out he's offline. Kellan receives Laina's message just as his dad restores the power. He sends her a video of Mason typing in his password, allowing her to copy it and gain access. She first checks Corinne's test score and is relieved to see that she passed with an 86%. Next, she checks her own score and finds that she got a 98% but still failed. Meanwhile, Wade had passed with a 42% and Blake passed with a 15%. She also checks Ellie's score and finds that she failed but got a score of 88%. She sees news coverage of Governor Redding claiming that Laina, after failing her test, had attacked several guards, killing 2 of them, and escaped. He places the blame for the shutdown on her. Meanwhile, Wendy sees the video that Kellan sent of the guard beating up a passing student, and she realizes that what is happening doesn't match the official story. She responds to Kellan and broadcasts the footage. When Laina discovers that Kellan has released footage from inside the school, she sends him images of the score. Mason and Victor then spot her on the cameras, and she runs. Meanwhile, Blake discovers the thinning and attempts to trick the guards into bringing the failed students to the recreation hall, but they refuse to take orders from anyone other than Mason. Blake then tries to fight the guards. Laina is caught by Mason, insisting she has proof that she passed, but he sends her to the thinning, where she finds that Blake has been subdued. Kellan receives Laina's proof of the test scores, both hers and Ellie's, so he sends the images to Wendy. Wendy reports on the documentation she had received about the falsified test scores. She reveals that Laina failed despite having the highest score in the school, while Blake, the son of the governor, had passed, despite receiving the lowest score. At the mansion, Vince insists that Governor Redding has to shut this down and let Laina go. But Redding insists there's one more move. Mason calls to ask for his approval to commence the thinning, which he denies, saying that the list needs to be revised. After making the changes, Laina is freed and told that she has passed. She goes to Blake and kisses him. Then, she is forced out of the room, and Blake is forced into her chair. Wade is also taken to the thinning. With varying levels of panic from the kids, the guards approach and inject them. Blake loses consciousness, and the school is taken out of lockdown. Laina reunites with her little sister outside, hugging her with tears in her eyes. Miss Birch joins them. Kellan hugs his dad, and both are smiling and relieved. The parents whose kids don't return to them begin to mourn as Wendy reports that Mason, King, has been taken in for questioning regarding his involvement with the altered test scores. Wendy's report stated that suspicions of Redding's involvement were discounted once it was discovered that his son had been among the failed students. Redding announced that he would help to investigate the occurrences and used Blake's failure to appeal to voters by portraying him as just like them. A large truck approaches a new facility, and the failed students, including Blake, are lowered into the building by elevator. They discover a factory that manufactures the tablets used for the tests, where unsuccessful students are employed.